Welcome to the RMTC-DHH February TA Live Principle 6, Least Restrictive Environment is Student-Based. My name is Carol Wilmot. Thank you to Shelley, our ASL interpreter from Alternative Communication Services, for interpreting today. We will continue to use the live binder found on this slide throughout the year to keep all the resources we discuss in one place on optimizing outcomes for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. The resources discussed during the webinars, as well as the slide deck, can be found in the live binder. We've discussed the first 5 principles of the Optimizing Outcomes Guidelines. Links to the recordings can be found on the RMTC-DHH website and in the Optimizing Outcomes live binder. This month, we will be discussing the 6th principle. Least restrictive environment is student-based. What is the least restrictive environment for students who are deaf and hard of hearing? I chuckle because this is such a huge topic, and as the theme states, it is student-based. We do not make this decision because the student is deaf or hard of hearing, or because of their communication modality. This is a data-based driven decision. We look at the whole child and have a discussion with the IEP team. There is no way to go into every aspect of deciding on an LRE during 1 hour. We do have a frequently asked question that addresses this if you want to read more about it. And of course, we have the resources in the live binder. Today, we're just going to talk about the few key points when deciding on LRE, and then hear from some districts on how they decide what is LRE for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. Communication is key. This is addressed by Florida Statute 6A 6.03028, Provision of FAPE. This statute states the IEP team is required to complete a communication plan prior to drafting the IEP for every student in the deaf and hard of hearing program. This ensures that the team is making IEP decisions that are providing language-rich environments. Any setting that does not meet the communication and related needs of a child who is deaf does not allow for the provision of FAPE and cannot be considered the LRE for that child. The team must ensure that whatever setting is chosen, that the communication plan guides the team to address communication in all areas of the student's day. The student should have equal access to all communication at the same time as their peers and direct access to communication with staff and peers. Often teams naturally discuss this topic for students who communicate in sign language. We know in small rural districts, it is difficult to provide opportunities for direct communication with peers and adults who sign. The team may need to think outside of the box. But teams cannot forget the students who communicate via listening and spoken language. Teams often breeze over the questions about direct communication on the communication plan for these students. The team thinks this is only for students whose primary language is ASL, but students who use listening and spoken language also have challenges related to direct communication. Even with the best technology, a student who is deaf and hard of hearing may miss information in class and need to learn how to advocate when they miss information to be full participants in the class and to be engaged in the class. I can remember times from when I was in the class, I had to reteach a lesson because of an access issue. We're going to watch a short video that illustrates this point.
To view the video, The Lost Joke, go to bit.ly/lost joke.
The term critical mass can be defined as the number of students in a classroom or program or school that share common communication modes and characteristics that is sufficient to support direct interaction opportunities among peers and adults. 80% of vocabulary is caught through incidental learning, not taught directly. This was also illustrated in the video on the previous slide. This is why students must have equal access at the same time as their peers to provide the opportunity to improve their first language receptively and expressively. Critical mass may also provide social capital, which is described by the National Deaf Center's Cawthorn et al. 2016, as how connections and networks between people provide access to information. This can lead to improved social emotional health. Research also indicates it may result in higher economic attainment and social skills. How could the video have ended differently if the student had had someone to talk about how to have the friends include her in better conversations? The idea of critical mass importance further justifies the need for quality communication plans. A school district may need to think outside of the box to provide students with critical mass. They may need to collaborate with another district, have clubs or after-school programs where the students get together with peers. I've even heard of some districts using Flipgrids for students to interact virtually. And don't forget different outreach opportunities, like NTID STEM Resource Center, the Gallaudet Regional South, and NTID, as well as local deaf service centers and your centers for independent living. Virtual platforms are making them more and more accessible, no matter where you live. LRE, the least restrictive environment, should address the whole child. It's not necessary for a student to have an academic achievement gap as a sole criteria for adverse educational effect. Both IDEA and the Florida statutes state the IEP team need to show the need for special education, which includes specially designed instruction, and that the need can be based upon any domain covered in the IEP, not solely curriculum and learning. I really like the Auditory Consultant Resource Network scales to remind me we need to have a balanced approach that addresses the whole child at school, in the home, and the community. The team needs to look at social emotional, cognitive, auditory, language, extra, and speech. As for the extras, those are going to the guidance counselor. Field trips. I can't tell you some of the best lessons I taught were on field trips. Working with therapists, extracurricular activities, beautiful place to work on self-advocacy, and so many other opportunities as addressed in the communication plan. All aspects of the school day can be used to teach. The team is preparing this student to be an adult who is college and career ready. ESE is a service. Exceptional student education is a service, not a place. A teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing can provide specially designed instruction and support in all places: general education classroom, resource classroom, self-contained classroom, the guidance office, field trips, clubs, sports, and more. Program considerations, eligibility, and placement for students does not equate to restricting educational choices to what is offered in the district. Statements of placement dependent on district or staff availability are not in line with the spirit of IDEA. Decisions for placement must be based on an individual student need and function to deliver instruction that will alleviate barriers to education in the least restrictive environment possible. When an IEP team makes the decision about LRE, the team must consider the continuum of alternative placements. The continuum includes the different options where students can receive this service. This placement includes the general education classroom, the general classroom with some services being delivered in a resource room, a self-contained classroom, a special education school, at home, in a hospital, or other public or private institution. Anytime a child is removed from general education, you have to justify it on the IEP. But that's okay. You are using the data from your assessments and the communication plan for this discussion as to the least restrictive environment that is language rich for that student who is deaf and hard of hearing. An optimized program for students who are deaf and hard of hearing demonstrates a continuum of services. Each local education agency must ensure that a continuum of alternative placements is available to meet the needs of students with disabilities for special education and related services. Usually the local education agency in Florida is the school district. For districts that do not have capacity, the full continuum of services may be provided through a contractual agreement with other districts or a private institution. District programs must have all the LRE options or contract for them, but a student's placement depends on their needs. The Florida's Educational Opportunity for Students with Sensory Impairments shows the continuum of different types of deaf, hard of hearing services. The Student Performance Profile, SPP, is a tool adapted by Cheryl DeConde Johnson based on the Colorado Individual Performance Profile, CIPP, also known as SIP. It is available from advantage.com resources page as a download. The SPP is a multi-purpose data-based discussion tool that presents a picture of standardized and functional assessments for children who are deaf and hard of hearing. It is not an assessment by itself. Rather, it is a tool to profile the results of various assessments conducted. It is used to assist the IEP and 504 teams in determining a student's needs in multiple facets of their educational programming, including placement in the least restrictive environment. The SPP can be used as a supplemental tool for guiding discussions for the following situations: initial assessments, which may lead to a possible placement; annual IEP reevaluation review and documentation of student progress; to consider a change in placement or services; transition between levels like preschool to kindergarten; to support performance data collection for programmatic review, and to ensure a continuum of services within a district. I think the uses of the SPP also show that LRE is not permanent. It can change from year to year and must be considered at every IEP meeting, or if the student is not making progress, or if the student is mastering all their IEP goals and possibly exceeding them. Now we will have a panel of experts come on and share how they decide on LRE for their students in their districts. We have Tricia Davidson from Pinnellas County Schools, Annemarie Patternoster from Flagler Schools, and Olivia Williams from Hillsborough County Public Schools. And first up is Trisha, who is the district specialist for deaf and hard of hearing in Pinnellas County, and she's also a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. Thank you, Trisha, for joining us today and sharing your expertise. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her. After she explains her student, she is going to open up the floor or the chat for you guys to ask questions about the student, and then we're going to have a discussion on how you would provide LRE in your district. So go ahead, I'm turning it over to you.
Good afternoon, I'm Tricia Davidson. I'm in Pinnellas County. Our county currently has a program of just under 200 DHH students. We have 3 cluster sites, one at each level, an elementary, a middle, and a high school. At these cluster sites, we offer self-contained classes along with resource or support facilitation. We offer reading in English, self-contained at each level. Right now, we have about 130 students who are out in the mainstream, which is in their home zone school, or at one of our special education center sites. Currently, we have in our cluster sites, we have a criteria to be at that cluster site. So most of those students, their primary language is sign language, and that is how they're accessing their curriculum. They need to have that access through a teacher of the deaf. They also need to be significantly behind their general ed peers. So 1 to 2 years or more to be in that self-contained class. We do offer some resource for those students who need that extra support. Sign language may be their primary language, but they're out with their gen ed peers. So that's kind of our whole continuum that we offer in Pinnellas. So the student I'm going to talk about today is a unique situation. He was a little boy. He's in 2nd grade currently. He was born hearing to a deaf father and a mother who lost her hearing at age 3. They started out in Pinnellas when he was just 3 years old. He wasn't in any program because, again, he was born hearing, showed no deficits. That early steps would be intervening. And just before pre-K, he was enrolled in a pre-K program. In August, that first week of August, they moved to the center of the state. So they were in that district for about a year to 2 years. And they got a hearing test in 2017. And that showed a mild to moderate loss. And the SRT was about 25 dB in both the right and the left ears. Soon after that audiogram was done, it was sent to the district to be reviewed. They moved to the East Coast. And while on the East Coast, they attended 2 different schools. The audiogram information did not follow the child. So then at the age of 7, came back, or just turning 8, came back into Pinnellas, starting 2nd grade. So in a general ed classroom, because he doesn't have an IEP or any record of anything that shows that he would be in need of ESE services. About a month and a half into the school year, the teacher asked for a parent conference and shared her concerns that he was having difficulty socializing with his peers, wasn't picking up the reading, phonics was very difficult. And the parents said, well, let's go get an audiology. Let's go to audiology and get a test. So they went to our local audiologist on Pinnellas County School Board property. And that test immediately came to me. As soon as I saw the results, which now has decreased. Now I don't have knowledge of the first test, but I'm seeing that it was a pretty significant loss. And he's sitting in a general education classroom and noticing that he's missing most of the sounds that would be said by the teacher. We immediately had a conference with the teacher. I got involved, the coordinator of interpreters, and we brainstormed things that we could do. So the first thing we did was set up the meeting for consent, which has to be within 30 days. Parents were all in agreement with that. So the next week, we decided to do a trial on a interpreter. And the reason being is because in the home, although the siblings, he was talking to the siblings, both the girlfriend and the dad were signing. So we wanted to make sure that he was having access in what could be his native language. And that showed to be a challenge, but he did start to pick up a little bit more and was paying attention more, because the biggest thing is he wasn't paying attention in class. So we had the opportunity, we just had lucked out that we had a coda who was a male, and really he connected with him right away, which was wonderful, and really helped support the teacher. As soon as we got the consent done, we did a 504 at the exact same time. So on that 504, we looked at adding the accommodations, but also a sign language interpreter. This team at this school was exceptional. We have that 60-day timeline, and they were able to get the testing done in about 30 to 40 days. So well within the time. And then we had the IEP. So the biggest concerns that the teacher had brought to our attention really focused a lot on his reading. She was doing iStation, which, as many of you know, is auditory based, so he was not doing well on that. The parents were looking into getting hearing aids, and at this time, they did not have the medical release, or their ENT was in Orlando. So they were kind of struggling with getting that appointment set up to get him hearing aids. So here is a kid with no amplification in a general ed class with an interpreter, but mind you, he's never used an interpreter before. So everybody he has talked to, including, his parents, has signed. So for him to learn to stop looking at the teacher and then look at an interpreter or look at both at the age of 8 was very difficult. We did help do some lessons. During the time that we were doing the assessments, the DHH teacher was able to go in and do some observations, give the teacher some support, also do the FLE. The FLE was really interesting. On the common words, he did fairly well. He had over 80%. What was interesting is that he could match the tone and the intonation of the person that was assessing him. In addition, when we did the nonsense words, he did not do well. He had less than 40% across the board, both in quiet and close. And then once we did distance and in noise without visuals, it dropped to 17%. So with that, it totally indicated that if this child is listening to a lesson that is brand new material, he is not going to have full access whatsoever. So we really did a lot in helping in coaching the interpreter as well as the teacher during this 40-day period where we were doing the assessments. Once the eligibility day came and we were having the meeting with the teacher and with the parents, the mother was very supportive of all of the suggestions we had, and we basically laid out everything, that he could stay in the general ed classroom with the interpreter as one part of the LRE, and we gave the pros and the cons, our concerns, and what we thought would be some challenges for him. And then we gave the idea of going to our cluster site and being a resource student where he would have a teacher of the deaf supporting him in a gen ed classroom, but would have lots of support directly from a deaf ed teacher in a gen ed classroom. And then the third option we discussed was being in a self-contained class. with a teacher of the deaf who will be signing everything. And after much discussion, we decided to, at this point, I'm going to wait. Sorry. So at this time, I'm going to ask anybody out there what I caught myself, Kara.
It's hard.
It is hard. I'm going to ask all of the participants what you think we decided as a district and what you would do in your district. Like, what were some of the things that you would think this child from my background? And I'm happy to add more information if you need more information.
So I'm opening up, I'm ready to read the chat if anybody wants to ask any questions or to suggest what they would have recommended. So we have Michelle that said his audiogram slopes. Did he need to be screened for Usher syndrome?
So Michelle, that's a great question. We have not screened him for Usher syndrome yet. He has, he came into the county. He's just been eligible for DHH in the last 3 weeks. So we have not gotten that completed yet, but we will. And to Lynn Brown, who says, get him aided ASAP. Yes, we are waiting on the parents to get a medical release. We've asked numerous times. We have actually reached out to them just this week to see if they have got that medical release so that we can get him his hearing assistive technology. But at this point, we are relying on the parents to do their part to get that medical release.
Does anyone want to add to the chat what option you think the team should have gone with? Just curious, or what you would have done in your district maybe? Was there any improvement seen academically and socially after the interpreter was added?
That's a great question. Socially, not as much. He was a very social kid, except he couldn't carry on the conversation. He always went up to the kids and tried to socialize with them, and even with the interpreter, because he didn't know how to use the interpreter. That was a challenge that he was having socially. In the gen ed setting, academically, there was an improvement, not necessarily on the test scores, but with the length of time that he was paying attention to the lessons. So he seemed to be getting more information out of the lessons once the interpreter came into the classroom.
So Julie suggested that he stay in gen ed, but move to the gen ed setting with the extensive DHH teacher support with the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing that signs. And so for time, we're going to go ahead and hear from you now, Tricia, what really did happen.
Okay, so what we did was we put him in the self-contained second grade class taught by a teacher of the deaf. We are going to collect data over the next 9 to 12 weeks, and we are looking to push him out into that gen ed classroom either at the beginning of the fall in 2 areas, looking at science and math, to be taught by the gen ed teacher with support from a resource teacher. And one of the biggest reasons was we wanted to have him be able to get the curriculum from a teacher of the deaf that is signing directly to him, going back to that not being able to truly understand how the interpreter works. And that really that is a skill that you have to teach. And we felt that we really needed to get that information because he's missed so much this year. We needed to get that curriculum into him as quickly as possible, and doing it through a teacher of the deaf and the self-contained would be the first thing. So Anika, yes, the parents were informed about this Florida School for the Deaf. The girlfriend, who's the significant other in the family, was very knowledgeable. She actually was one of my students at Cross Bayou 20 years ago. So she had done her research, and she was actually a big part of the decision because she understood all of the different levels. She understood that there was a self-contained class, that there was a resource support, and that there was gen ed in your home zone school and the Florida School for the Deaf. And that is not necessarily off the table. We did discuss that, but he does have 5 siblings, and they were not willing to send him to the Florida School for the Deaf because he's so close with his siblings. They have 1 child every year. So they're very, very close in age and very close-knit family.
And I like that you took the students' perspective into that. I think that's very important that they are a part of that team. And I also like that you recognize the fact that LRE is not stagnant, that you are building a particular skill and are looking already forward to trying a different setting next year. And I really appreciate your insight and sharing with everybody this particular case study. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next case study with Olivia Williams from Hillsborough County.
Okay, hi everybody.
I forgot to read your introduction, Olivia. So Olivia is a teacher of the deaf at an elementary cluster site for students who are deaf and hard of hearing in Hillsborough County. She's also a sign language interpreter for Purple Communication, and she teaches sign language at the University of Tampa. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge with the team. I really appreciate it.
Of course, absolutely. So jumping right into this student, he was born in Honduras with a profound bilateral hearing loss. He was identified with this hearing loss at age 2 and was moved to the United States. The family has changed communication approaches throughout the duration of the child's time in our district, from oral to total communication, oral, back and forth. At grade 2, it was decided that total communication would be his primary mode of communication, and that was agreed upon with the parents, but they were really wanting to encourage his use of oral skills. He was bilaterally implanted with cochlear implants at the age of 9. So he has a really good foundation with spoken Spanish, spoken English, and he is really receptive and is making a lot of gains with the use of his amplification. He used an FM system in class as well as a sound field, and with the use of an interpreter has a lot of access to the classroom. However, some of the challenges that we faced with this student was that he was really lacking a sufficient L1. So he had bits and pieces of different language modalities and different languages in spoken language, but he just didn't have a good, strong L1. So building off of that was definitely a challenge. He was 2+ grade levels behind, had deficiencies in both reading and math. So at the 5th grade level, he was reading anywhere between a 1st and a 2nd grade level and performing in math not much higher at an ending 2nd grade level. The student was very social. He enjoyed making friends with hearing students and would use his best speech, but he really needed to have sign language in order to best understand the curriculum. He was highly motivated. He has consistent use of his amplification. He came to school regularly and was really excited to learn. So he had early intervention at a younger age, and he's had daily support DHH. Granted, it was in different modalities, but he's had support from a DHH teacher from the age of 3. So that looked like a special class. He was also in a general education class with resource services, push in and pull out. So we've tried all of those different things, but we see that he's not quite making the gains that we wanted to see in both reading and math. So just a quick snapshot of what it looks like for our district as far as our continuum of services. In Hillsborough County, we really do have a critical mass here. We have anywhere between 690 to 720 deaf and hard of hearing students. We have 6 cluster sites for the deaf, 2 in elementary, 2 in middle, and 2 in high school. The cluster site that I work at here has anywhere between 30 to 55 deaf and hard of hearing students, depending on their age. So when they become eligible for pre-K services at the age of 3, they'll start school here all the way through 5th grade. So we are looking at students that are same age as this particular child using the same modality, having around 10 to 12 students. We have a large supply or access, not supplies. We have a lot of staff here that are able to work with deaf and hard of hearing students. We have anywhere between 5 to sometimes up to maybe 8 interpreters, depending on the grade levels and the needs. And we have 5 certified teachers of the deaf, as well as an audiologist on campus. So what do you guys think would be an LRE decision based on this child, or questions about this child? Do I have to do anything here, Karen?
No, when they come up, I'll read them to you. I will share while we wait for just a second that it is in Florida statute that at every IEP meeting, or at least annually, we have to share information about the Florida school for the deaf and blind to our families. But that admission into the Florida school for the deaf and blind is separate from the district. That is exclusively done by that school, which is different from some other states. And there was a little question about the student that the family chose that he stay home because of his 5 siblings, and he wanted to be with his family, and he had direct communication at home, which is unlike some of our other students. So, but is there anybody want to share what they would have chosen for LRE for this student, or any questions? I think you're very lucky that you have such a robust program in Hillsborough County. Most of our districts do not have that. Our 6 very large districts, and only 6 in the state of Florida, have such robust programs with multiple cluster sites that like that at all the levels that I know of. Great. I'm going to go ahead. I don't see anything coming in, so we're going to go ahead and switch and let you share what you guys made for a decision for this kiddo. Oh, wait. Karen's just came in. It sounds like he has a good support system that provides the critical mass exposure, yes, and access to the mainstream at the same time. Definitely, yes, I agree, Karen. That is a blessing when you're in a very large district.
Yeah, I certainly don't take that for granted. We have such a large continuum here that really the best placement for the child is not a challenge to provide. Just figuring out the resources and how we're going to move those around is the challenge that we face. But we have a lot of different options for the children. And that's why I'm excited to talk about LRE, because I was looking at the continuum, and even in that continuum, there are subsets, and it doesn't have to be one or the other. It really can be a blend of multiple ones of those throughout the day, depending on the child. So it doesn't have to look like a gen ed classroom with resource services or a special class. So I want to just briefly talk about some of the things that we've been doing in Hillsborough County and some of the things that we have been working towards as far as making sure that these students, like you said, have access to all of the different domains. So not just being concerned about the curriculum and learning of the child, but also their social exposure and their ability to learn and grow from their peers, and the opportunities that they have for engaging play and for working, on field trips, like you were saying, and being exposed to not only the DHH peers, but also the gen ed peers. So our decision here took a little bit of brainstorm power, but our decision was that the student was assigned to a co-teach DHH fused model. So we have that aggregate number of students within the gen ed setting. The highest need subjects were provided in small group instruction with a DHH teacher. So what that kind of looked like is that we had 10 students that were a level that were varying levels. So we had students who were performing at a lower level curriculum and learning wise, but also needed that same level of social exposure, which is one of those domains. And so what we do is we take those students to include this child here. And it's not just the DHH teacher pushing into the gen ed setting, it's the 10 deaf and hard of hearing students along with the sign language interpreter and the certified teacher for the deaf pushing into the gen ed classroom. So for different subjects, depending on the day, guys, the LRE changed even for the day. If it was that particular lesson that was too challenging, or there wasn't vocabulary or accessibility for the children in that particular lesson, we share classrooms. And so I was able to fluidly move and bring the children, as they needed more structure and more support, into a small group setting. And when they were prepared, or when they were ready, this child was able to move back into the classroom with the support of the DHH teacher. So they were able to have exposure in this child. I say they because there were several children that were in this particular model that we were using. But he was able to be around his same age peers and practice those social skills and using his speech and listening and getting to talk about YouTube videos and TikTok and growing and having that incidental language, but also have the DHH teacher in the classroom on the floor, differentiating instruction and helping to facilitate groups and rotations. And it was also a fantastic exposure for the hearing children as well. So what we would like to see in the future, and looking at the LRE for this young man in the future, is diminishing support within that gen ed setting. So during his day, he has a DHH teacher with him at all times. Now, whether that be supporting him in the gen ed classroom or having him self-contained for the highest need subjects, we would like to see some independence and ability to perform with the general education curriculum and the sign language interpreter without that constant presence of the DHH teacher. So we are trying to kind of increase his independence and hopefully see his success there in that setting.
Thank you. That is beautiful. And I think actually Karen summed it up. How great to have that flexibility to really have a fluid LRE that meets the child's needs and raising those expectations for him in a setting that also gives him access to the resources to maximize his learning. Thank you so much for this valuable information that you shared. It really is a beautiful model what Hillsborough has. And so next, we have Annemarie, who is an itinerant teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing and also AT specialist for Flagler County. And Flagler is on the opposite end of what we have been talking about, but in Florida, it's 85% of what most of our students are receiving, which is in your smaller to rural districts, many of which do not have cluster sites. So you have to be a little more creative in offering that LRE continuum. But she still does a phenomenal job. And I know even in Duval County, because of some of our incidences, this was most of what our students were encountering. Even at a cluster site, we still didn't always have that critical mass. So I'm going to let Annemarie share about her student now.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yes, listening to the other two districts talk, it's just evident that we are much, much smaller. Flagler does have 9 public schools and we have 1 charter school. So a charter school is somewhere that I would go and do some evaluations. And if a student needed services, I could serve them there. There are approximately 30 students who either have an IEP currently or are on a 504 plan under the deaf, hard of hearing eligibility. So again, it's very tiny. Each of those students who does have an IEP also has an ESE support facilitation teacher on their plan. And so they actually act as a case manager. But together, I have found, I'm pretty lucky in the fact that I feel like I work with some really exceptional people. So we do work collaboratively to make sure that that IEP is being met across all classrooms and environments in the school. So my student here, let me pop back over here. He was born with a profound hearing loss. He was born to hearing parents and received his very first implant at 11 months of age. It was one that he didn't take to very well. Did get a second implant at 34 months of age. And again, he was not a consistent wearer. So I think a lot of language development was lost during the time that he just wasn't tolerating the implants. He did go through early intervention. He has amazing parents, super supportive. He actually also has a younger sister, just a grade level below him, and she is also bilaterally implanted. But he has been kind of around Tennessee and Florida in different settings, different school settings, and just transferred to Flagler County in August for us. Some of the settings in Tennessee, I know that he was in more of a self-contained class, and he did transfer to a district in Florida, and he was gen ed. However, I think he was being pulled a lot into more of a resource room with a teacher of the deaf. More kids in there were signers, and just he and his sister were in there together, and they obviously just use spoken language and listening. Another just tidbit to throw out there to kind of know what his background is. When he was in Tennessee, he did have an FM system, but they only put one receiver instead of two receivers. And they were using it on his weaker ear. So when he came to Flagler, we kind of made a different decision as far as what to do with that. But the supports he's getting now, I'll kind of keep that for the LRE decision. The supports he's getting now are direct instruction with me, teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. He gets ESE intervention for ELA and reading, math, and also gets language therapy just one time a week. Challenges that he is facing are purely academic at this point. He is 2 grade levels behind in ELA and reading, 3 grade levels behind in math. He was having some issues with his math teacher, not providing him all the accommodations that were on the written plan. She also taught science, and he's not very independent. We see a lot of learned helplessness. His strengths with us, though, he is very articulate. He speaks with a Southern accent. He does benefit greatly with using the FM system. He does know what his accommodations are. He actually carries a nice visual support. So in the event that his math and science teacher isn't doing what he needs to be done, he can advocate for himself that way. One of the biggest things that his parents did comment on was that he has friends. He comes home and he talks about the friends that he's making at our school. And that's something that they were not seeing before in his past. I think I just wanted to touch on one other thing that I may have seen. Oh, just with when I did do his functional listening evaluation, he had a lot longer processing when I did not have the microphone on. So it's just so evident. And then obviously these cotton masks that we have to wear because of COVID are just negatively impacting his ability to listen. His teachers lovingly wear these face shields, which really help out, and then use the microphone with him. So as far as any questions for me?
I'll give it a minute to let them chat, but I do like that the SPMP, the student performance profile, really addresses the fact that in your small and rural that you do have to use some of your exceptional student education support when you don't have enough teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing. Karen asked, what supports has the family received that help them develop needed skills to communicate and build his language at home? You said they are great parents. What is their involvement?
They are wonderful. So, you know, as far as like language goes and listening, I mean, beautiful, beautiful speech, beautiful language. He is a fluent reader, which is wonderful. It really comes down to more comprehension skills. So we recently just had an IEP meeting and we spoke a lot about doing some tutoring. So doing that for the academic support piece.
So, and I know you've only had him since August. Had they talked about any like auditory oral supports at home and communication development at home? You said early intervention. So they had early intervention in the home probably.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I did actually ask them in the beginning of the year, just trying to get to know them. If they did have anyone, I think that they were just moving back and forth quite a bit from Florida to Tennessee and back. So they didn't have anyone established as far as a therapist outside of school. But again, willing to pursue that if recommended.
Sounds like he has a lot of splinter skills that would benefit from some tutoring, and I agree. Anything else? Give it one more minute before we share what you guys' final decision was on our LRE. All right, let me go ahead and flip it.
Okay, so again, because we are such a small district, we don't have that continuum that you know, Hillsborough County might have. So it is a little bit more difficult for us here. We try to do the best that we can with the supports that we have, which is obviously just the itinerant services and then the ESC support. So he is continuing in a general education class. He does have a split schedule, so he has an AM teacher and a PM teacher. That PM teacher is that math and science class. He does get pulled out for ESC every single day with concentration for his math skills and the ELA skills. I also see him 3 days a week, and I see him one-to-one for just intensive support. We were able to make a switch in his schedule. So we have a brand new math and science teacher. It just definitely was not a good fit. And through all of the communication that we had with the administration, they were able to honor that for us because it really was not in the best interest for our student. He was not going to grow or excel in that environment. We are considering looking into a possible secondary eligibility for specific learning disability just because he is so behind in his academics. I do feel like he is in the best and the least restrictive, I said that wrong. He's in the least restrictive environment with us, which fits him better than I think when he was in the resource type classroom or the self-contained classroom. I think he does learn quite a bit from the students around him, and the fact that he is making friends is also just a huge component in overall development and growth. So.
And I think you are providing him the continuum. We sometimes think that the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing is the only resource room that is available to students who are deaf and hard of hearing, but sometimes it is an ESC resource room and that they can be educated together. And we can train that ESC teacher to help provide that resource when you don't have the capacity within your district and thinking creatively for that. And he's lucky that he has his sister to be able to know someone else who goes through those same challenges as him, and they can talk about those challenges together. So I really think that's great that you shared that. And Lynn also agreed about the tutoring. I think sometimes the pull-out classes make it difficult to follow what's happening in the classroom, and any push-in is important. So doing that combination of push-in and pull-out, and even addressing the teacher, even sometimes in our large districts and our small districts, even a change in teacher of gen ed can be an important decision. And yes, and Carmelina also shared, it takes very courageous conversations sometimes in the smaller rural districts, and being that great advocate that you are for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing when you don't have somebody else to back you up because you're the only person in your district. So I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. We only have about 5 minutes left. If everybody wanted to pop on, I want to just say one more thank you. And if there's any final questions you guys have for any of our panelists, we do have about 5 minutes.
Kara, there's one question in the chat if you want to grab it.
So we do have a question. What considerations do you look at for specific learning disabled identification when a deaf hard of hearing student is several grade levels behind? How do you determine if it's a language or truly SLD? I don't know if you can pop on, Annemarie.
Yeah, so we are actually having a meeting soon with our school psychologist. So we're going to kind of give her a rundown of all the things going on with the student, share all the academic progress, and just basically compile all the concerns that we have and hope that she has amazing testing and protocol. So I don't know yet because we haven't actually had this meeting with her, but it's definitely something I can share if that's something Kara wants to kind of pass out later, that
Sure.
sort of information.
And I will just add, from a compliance point of view, if whether the student is staffed specific learning disabled or not, we can use those best practices that we know from that field or any field and provide services for a student once they have an IEP. We look at each individual child and provide support. But yes, identifying specific learning disabilities in students who are deaf and hard of hearing is very challenging.
And I will say too, a lot of this came from the parents. They've been concerned for years, not just recently. So I think for them have a little bit of insight into how their son is learning and how he's thinking and how he's processing information. I think it's just something that they really want it satisfied also.
I'm going to thank you all for being here today, especially Tricia and Annemarie and Olivia. We appreciate your time and expertise on this topic. We know that it is a different kind of school year. Just know that we are here to support you all. And if you have any more questions about LRE, please feel free to contact us. We love to brainstorm ways out and being creative when you're thinking outside the box to help you find that least restrictive environment in your district. So I want to also thank Shelley today from Alternative Communication Services for providing our interpreting. Next month, we will be going on to Principle 7. And that will be on March 10th. The recording will be posted on the RMTC-DHH website, as well as posted in our live binder. We love hearing from you guys so much and are happy to help you in any way you can. So you can connect with us through social media like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vimeo, and YouTube. You can also sign up for our newsletter, and we love to hear your comments on social media. As you know, we are a Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Student Education discretionary project, and all of our services are provided at no cost to you. So to continue this work, we need to collect survey data to justify why our services are needed. So if you could please take a few minutes and fill out the survey, we would greatly appreciate it. All right, well, thank you very much again, everyone, for being here. I don't think I see any more questions, but we will look forward to seeing you guys next month for our next TA Live.